See, everything is nowadays, everything is online. Like I said, uh, where if you want to order something, or if you want to book a flight, if you want to actually purchase your even spectacles or file taxes, or you know or a book meetings, so everything is online. So how actually the internet works, how web works? So basically it works on based on the principle of a client and server architecture, where server uh, where all browsers, any browsers, there are different types of browsers, such as what are types of browsers here? Chrome. So we have Safari, and these are different types of browsers: Chrome, Safari, Opera, and Brave. These are all different types of browsers here, and among them, quite popular browser market share is among them, Chrome is quite popular. So these are all clients, and there is one thing that actually solves all these requests. Uh, so I'll try to make it. We will try to make sense of it by this one example, one analogy here. So suppose if you went to, there is actually went to the hotel. So you went to the hotel, right? So there are a lot of tables here. You went to the hotel, right? Lot of tables here, and there is one person here. So who is he? Waiter. So what he does? There is only one waiter. What he does? He takes the orders, right? He takes the orders from these customers. So a lot of these three tables are filled. So this table will order something from this table. Also, he will get some order from this table. Also, he will get some order. So there is only one person, and so he is serving the many tables or many people here. So what kind of relationship here it is? Yes, it is a one to many or a many to one relationship, right? It is many to one relationship where so this person is actually getting a request. So where I need noodles and I need pasta, I need a sandwich. So and he delivers. Don't. So probably what he does actually, there is a customer here. Customer gives order to waiter, right? And waiter gets this thing processed from cook, chef. So when actually from the chef, it is delivered to waiter, and waiter delivers back to the customer. So here there can be lot of customers, right? So what customers are doing? They are raising the request. They are requesting, we need this food. I need sandwich. I need pasta. I need pizza. The waiter takes that request and processes that request with the help of chef and the accounting system or billing system, whatever it goes through, and we get actually that thing processed and delivered it to the customer. So here we can see here a lot of only one waiter is there. A lot of customers are, yes, lot of customers request that. So same thing. But what if actually if there are if uh, the restaurant is overloaded, it would be helpful if you have actually multiple waiters. What happened if a restaurant is overloaded? If the restaurant is overloaded, all orders are processed slowly because he has to spend more time serving this table, so that other table has to wait. If there are multiple waiters, while one waiter is serving this table, other waiter will attend this table. That is what actually happens on the internet when some results are actually on internet also, how it works here, so you have the server, a particular machine that is hosted somewhere on the cloud or somewhere on the internet, and all browsers, think of browser as a customer. All browsers, who uses the browser again? User, right? Like us. Yeah. So I'm using the browser here. If I go to Amazon to purchase something, I'm using the browser. The browser is like a customer, or so in the analogy, compare with the analogy, browser is a, yeah, browser is a customer. Yes. And so this server, whatever the server, is like a waiter. So, and so each browser, like at the same time I opened this Amazon, as well as you opened Amazon. So all those requests go to the same server. Okay. Server will process that and respond back. Okay. So the request, the first who will initiate the request? Client, which means the browser. Okay. So consequent, in fact, of course, browser is the one sending a request. We are the one actually commanding. So if I click on this one, particular this one, so I have actually asked browser to send particular request. Behind the scenes, it sent the request and response came back from the server, and showed whatever the response came back from server. It is displayed here. So same thing. What happens if we have a single server only? If it is overloaded, we will get actually delay, latency. We'll experience the latency, where we experience that, so it feels like server is slow. So why it is slow? If there is only one server serving millions of users or browsers, clients across the world. That is the reason everyone is actually trying to access the results, grades. When grades are released, when particular news is released, servers tend to crash when they are overloaded. So in such a case, what happened? We use something called load balancing. So something called load balancing, where the multiple servers are there. So like another waiter we introduced, there will be multiple servers. Like if there is another waiter, so while he is attending this table, so another waiter can actually, while he is serving this table, another waiter can attend this table, like this. Like this, while these clients are served, other new clients can be actually routed to new server, other server. So we use something called load balancing on internet. So to balance, there's a load balancing server. It based on the load or the some configured criteria. It will actually in a round robin or based on the um, CPU. So the requests are actually uh, sent across, load balanced across these servers. So then on a large scale, this is a big picture, very big picture. We have a server, we have a client. Now when particular in the browser, when you particular URL, what is URL? URL typically contain HTTP, which is a protocol, and then google.com. So, and this is called a domain. So, but thing is that this domain is not actually for this domain is basically for us, because you if IP address is something like 32.42.221.53. If IP address is like that, so if you enter this thing in a browser, your browser address tab, still site will work. But thing is that we can't remember this. So that is the reason we use something called, this is like an address book. Just like, in olden days, there is actually address book, phone book. If you open in alphabetical manner, if you go through those uh, names, you may find, if you know the name, you may find actually corresponding phone number for that person. So likewise, actually, so we use, there is something called a DNS. DNS. What is DNS? DNS stands for domain name system. So DNS, what is DNS? DNS is used for, what is DNS? We will see. What DNS is used for? DNS stands for domain name server system, and it has a server, name server. So that name server is like a directory. So where DNS, we have the DNS, and where, for suppose if you are accessing google.com, the first client, that is a browser which is can be Chrome, right? Browser. So if you enter that thing, it will access this, it will ask DNS system for a, so give me IP address of this particular domain name, and it will respond back with that IP. That can be anything 32 or whatever, 48, 184, something like that, which can be. So, and then it will send a response, because on a internet, each server has a very unique IP. Each server is associated with the IP. So each server is addressed with, so likewise, when you actually order some package from the internet, it is delivered, right? Delivered to your house or to you directly because of the address, phone number. So likewise, how do you actually particularly identify those servers? Server means a machine, computer, just like your laptop, desktop. So that is placed on our server. It has something called public IP is associated with it. Public IP, which is called. So public IP is associated with it. If you have public IP, you can access that particular server is accessible or reachable over the internet. So when you have that public IP, so what is a public IP for a Google? So we can use, we can go to DNS lookup. Some sites are there. Okay, if you go to the DNS lookup, and it will, some google.com, if I go to search, it will give us the what is actually in a DNS server. DNS server is like a directory, just like a phone directory where a username is actually associated with the phone number, where you can actually, when you know the, and because that is what actually you do in a phone book, right? Because you can't remember phone numbers, you would save that particular number with a name, right? So yeah, with the name. All public servers, all servers will have a public IP associated. So just like your phone book, where as you don't, just like you don't remember a phone number, so that you store that phone number with a particular meaningful name. So DNS server also contains a domain name and a IP address associated with it. Because we can't remember this IP address, we use domain name. It's like a, it's like contact book. This is a contacts phone book. This is like a phone book or directory for the internet. So what is IP for the Google here? 142.250.190.206. If I copy this thing, if I enter in a address bar, paste, and I'm hitting enter, okay? And do you see here Google is loaded? Yes, IP is the one. IP is all websites, because to access a website you need a IP, because to reach to the server. Yes, this is the same IP address for the Google. If you enter it on any browser, it will work, because Google server, this is actually the unique, think of it as a logical, it is a logical address. Think of it as a unique ID associated with the Google server. So what is actually, if you go to, if you go back again, what is the IP address of Yahoo? If I go back, Yahoo.com. You see, it has actually, just like I said, when you have actually uh, multiple, like I said in our example, if there are actually single person serving, single waiter only, he may tend to actually wait, right, while serving. uh, if there are a lot of customers in a restaurant, he will end up actually uh, overloaded, so that other customer needs to wait. So if you have actually multiple waiters, the more customers can be served. So for that, likewise, we can see here for Yahoo, we can see multiple A records. We call it as a record and multiple IP addresses. So which means that they have, just like a multiple waiters in a restaurant, they have multiple servers, so that they can serve a lot of customers all over the world. In fact, you may get actually question like, then why Google is actually more than Yahoo. More people would be using Google. You may actually get a question like, why there is only one server. No, in fact there are multiple servers for a Google as well. Google uses load balancing, as well as there are multiple servers. If I actually copy anything here and go to new site, and if I enter, paste and go, and you can see that the Yahoo, you can see here Yahoo here. So I'm actually, but there is actually complex mechanism is going on here. So server identifies the host, and so when you request something, when request is sending, any browser supports, desktop browser supports inspect web developer tools. If I go to the network and reload the every request, how HTTP works actually we will see in a moment. Request response contains headers. HTTP request and response contains headers, and server may see something called host, and based on that, servers actually tend to process requests. Since I'm directly accessing that with IP, so you may not see actual page loaded, but you can see by looking at this, we have hit the Yahoo server. So this whole process is actually working. Just like actually, if you want to type a phone number, what you will do, but you don't remember a phone number, you will open your contacts book and you will search the person, you will copy that number, you will paste it in dial pad and you will dial. Just like that, browser also doesn't know that IP address. So first, what browser does, browser will send a request to the DNS server. DNS server is like a contacts book or a directory for a internet. Do you understand? So it will respond back with IP address, just like a 184.225.224.18 or something like that. So, and then it will take this. What is this IP address? Again, this IP address is like a unique ID that particular server is having. So how do you reach that server? Using this ID only, unique address only. We call it as a IP address or logical address. So this unique address, by using this unique address, browser can actually reach that server on the internet. So what browser sends, since it has the IP and we have this public server here, that server, what is that server address? Just like I mentioned here, these are random IPs I'm taking, 25.224.18. So since it has the IP address, it will send that request to the server. So why it is server? It serves many browsers, which are clients. Always who will initiate the request? Browser. Browser is the one first will initiate the request. So it will send a request asking, get me the page, which is google.com, or which can be a google.com or amazon.com. So how actually, so for communication, request is sent and response is received to the client, which is a browser. And once response is received, that response is displayed here on the browser in any manner. That can be a web page, that can be a notification icon, bell or sound or anything. But for this browser and server to communicate, they need one medium. So they need one, understanding. So for that understanding, just like, you and me we are able to speak because I know English, you know English. That is why we are able to understand. Likewise, these different components on the network, different nodes are able to communicate when they are actually both of different nodes, when though they agree on something together. So, and there are also, you like we use the language, they also use language, and we can call it as a protocol. So what is that protocol is used here? Just like language, English we use to communicate. So think of a language that server and browser know each other so that they can communicate each other. So they use something called HTTP. So the language these network devices or different nodes on a network used to communicate, we can call it as a protocol. So what kind of protocol they use? HTTP, which is application layer protocol. HTTP transfer hypertext transfer protocol. So HTTP stands for hypertext transfer protocol. So when request is sent, response is received. So through HTTP, how HTTP is structured? HTTP is structured like this. HTTP contains headers and body. HTTP contains headers and body. So just like, we speak in English, or else, likewise, they have this set of actually rules, because if I don't speak English according to the grammar, you don't understand. You would not understand. Likewise, think of it as a grammar. So they follow specific format so that, the whatever is server is telling, client will understand. Client in the sense browser. Whatever is browser is requesting, server will understand. So what is that? Which is a HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol. It doesn't matter. Request means that from browser to, not necessarily a browser. It can be anything. So any software that actually initiates, that play a role of you know uh, connecting and actually requesting something and respond, receiving that, getting that request out, we call it as a client. So basically the software we use to connect with server is a browser here, which is a client, and when server. So when request is sent to server, HTTP request is sent, and response is also what protocol server will respond back in HTTP. So it doesn't matter, that can be a request, that can be a request, that can be a response. It doesn't matter. It follows the same structure, which is header and body. Inside headers are like a key value pairs, just like what is a name, just like key value pairs means that what server Apache, which means the what kind of server it is. So it will, headers contains the metadata about the server and the response. And we have body, which is separated by slash or slash, and we call it as a carriage return line feed, CRLN. Sorry, CRLF, not LN. So we have body. Inside a body, server can respond back with the either text, pure text, or XML, or HTML, or JSON. Inside a body, server can respond back. So client also can send inside a body. Client also can send uh, inside a body. So body can be, it doesn't matter either request or response. Response can always contain a body, but the request, there are some actually rules the way client has to follow if it has to send a request. So inside it has to send a request with body. So client can also send a body having either text or XML or HTML or JSON. So what is HTML? HTML is a language for the websites. Language for websites. HTML defines how particular website looks like. Where for suppose if you take this Amazon site here, if I go to the home, and here it is actually this we see this sign in securely because it is defined in a HTML. So it is defined in HTML. That is why we see. The why we see actually these boxes, because it is actually defined in HTML. The browser understands that and displays that. Hypertext markup language, HTML stands for. So we can see for any website, we can go to view page source and we can see the behind the source code. What actually contributes, what makes up this website. We can see all that source code here. So why that website looks like, so because of this whole source code, because of the code here, we see website like this. And we can also go to inspect. And we can see here those each elements, we call it as an element, or if it is in some frameworks we call them as components. So these elements, and if I go to, I can select this one, we can select particular element here. So if I come back here, if I delete this thing, right click, there is actually, if there is a delete, do we have delete here? Or I can delete some, I can do what? Click on delete key on my keyboard. If I click on delete key, that whole button is gone, check. So if I want to remove this whole altogether, this particular element from here, I can delete this thing. That is gone, because that we see web page, because the source code, what browser receives the HTML. This is how it works. When you visit first a website, when you visit a website, any website, you have the browser, right? You have the browser, it will send a request to server. It will send a request to server, which is HTTP request. And the response will receive. Response contains, the HTTP request contains initially no body, because there are different things called methods: get, post, put, delete, and then update, patch. These are different methods. So client actually makes a request with appropriate method. We call it as a HTTP verb or a method with appropriate HTTP method. So initially, when you actually enter something in a URL, just like a google.com, you enter something in a URL. So what browser does, browser will send something called a get request. The get request doesn't contain any body. So server will respond back with HTTP. It uses HTTP protocol only, and will respond back with the HTTP request. Again, would contains what? Headers. These are headers. And a body. What this body contains, Body contains what? HTML. So browser will receive this HTML and will display page according to HTML. So suppose I can show you something how HTML works. We can go to code pan. This will give us ID. So I can use div hello wall. This is HTML. So you can see here that HTML is displayed here. And I want this text to be, we use CSS. So suppose div font and color red. And I can increase the font to be, let's say 5em. And we can put, let's say I want a background color to be gray, or let's say blue. Yellow. You see this HTML browser, what is happening here? Browser understand that if there is a div, I have to actually display this thing. We call CSS stands for Cascade Style Sheet, and that is used to used for presentation to format elements, to format these tags content. So when you actually receive something, we can see here we receive those HTML and CSS, and browser displays that data properly, appropriately here. So suppose if I go, so and we have this REST client here with which is Postman, and if you try to actually, let's say that HTTP and amazon.com, if I try to send a, see, these are different types of requests out there. So get and head requests don't encode a body, they are just headers. So if I send that request, check what is received from server. So we received so if I go to raw, and you can see what is received from server here. And we can see here we received a lot of stuff. We received HTML, we received JavaScript, we received this is typically HTML inside a body. You can see here in this REST client, what we can see, if we can see properly, we can differentiate. We can see for the request and response. So we can see for a request, if there is any body, we can see here, and headers we can see. For a response, you can see here save response, which is a response from server. The body shows that what we received in a body, what is encoded. So we received HTML. And if that HTML is actually rendered, how browser would display? And we can see that in a preview. We can see this is what we see when that is previewed. This is a raw. So we receive HTML. So when browser client means, what is a client here? Browser. But what is a client here? Client here is a Postman. So here instead of browser, I am using a Postman as a client. The client is anything that makes a request and gets the response from the server. So why I'm using Postman? Because I have more as a developer, as a QA engineer. So you can have the more flexibility, so more actually freehand. So you can have, you are the actually king. So you can control what headers to send, and what if different headers are sent, what will get how server will respond. For suppose if this request, this server accepts get only for this URL. So what is the URL again? URL is the one. Likewise, IP address identifies the server, URL identifies the resource on the server. So if you check this URL contains many things here. First thing is a protocol and then the domain. So this domain is only the one, this domain is the one which will be converted to the IP address with the help of DNS server. And then whatever comes after, we call it as a directory path or subdirectory. And this path represents the resource on the server, a file or resource on the server. So here, the what is a resource? Resources is just a root, just a slash or nothing, you know. So when this accepts only get, if try to send a put request, how server will respond? Amazon server will respond with something called, you can see. So it doesn't matter whatever the request we are sending, it is response. If I send delete, okay, so Amazon is actually pretty much accepting any kind of request, any kind of method you send, it is responding, pretty much responding with the page. But for suppose if you go to Google, so basically as a best practice, we don't allow other requests. If I try to send a delete, what Google does, you see, Google respond. What is inside a body? Body contains, if I go to the raw, I received this page. If I copy this thing, this is what actually body contains when when this response is received from the server. So copy this one. If I go to code pen, so you can paste that thing here. And if when that is rendered, and you can see this is what actually. So this whole HTML, what this whole HTML does, this whole HTML, when browser sees this whole HTML, so it will render tag by tag, and what you will get actually, what is the resulting content that you would see, this is what it is. And we can see that here. So the server responded with this. So in a body, you can see what is in headers. If you go to headers, that is a key value pair. And you can see what is in headers. You see hello, date, and then server. What kind of server it is? Server identifies. Server is the header which contains the server name GWS, which is. And if I so likewise, always this response can contains, the body can contain not only HTML, it can contain sometimes pure text. In fact, HTML is also a text, but which is actually structured in such a way, you know, if you see here, this is also pure text, but it has some format in structured in such a way that browser can understand, render that. And body can contain text or JSON or XML, okay, or any other format. So for suppose if we go to Amazon, if I go to the inspect, each browser will give us actually ability to look into the requests that are sent to the server. So from a single website, you know, the ideally, you know, the lot of requests will go to the server. You see lot of requests. So sometimes the server can be a same thing, a server can be offered different different servers, you know, for each request server can be so for suppose, you know, but to fetch images, they are using different server. To get the data, they are using different server. So if you click on any request on the browser, so you can see headers, request headers. You can see request headers here. If I click on raw, so you can see all request headers. And if you click on raw here, you can see all response headers. So this is all actually as a raw. What you see is raw in the sense as it is, how actually this data is received from the server you are seeing. So but the all headers are separated and that is displayed here, you can see. And if I go to the body, or so this is what kind of request it is, and you can see here this is a head request, head method. So there are different types of methods. Those are actually that what method it is actually is present in a request line. We call it as a request line. It contains what kind of method it is. And if I go to what is the response here, if I click on response, you can see here, in fact actually no response from here. And you can see here for this is a response. And in fact, we filtered hexachar here. So if I go to all, sorry, this is all already, I think. If we filter hexachar, we will see that asynchronous requests, AJAX requests. So if I click on, just let's say if I click on this one, and you can see here for this request what kind of response we received: JSON. So it is displayed in a pretty manner, just like as HTML has a structure. It has its own structure. So this is HTML is a server response back with HTML, where that HTML browser understands that HTML and renders that. So in such a way that, in a beautiful manner, it formats that, in elegant manner, so that we see that. We don't see, if we see that this is ugly, we can't understand anything. But this is displayed when this is rendered, we make sense of it. And so in fact, HTML, if body server will respond with HTML in body when it is intended for browser to render, and server will respond back with a JSON or XML when it wants to send the data back to the client to be displayed. For suppose what kind of data it is, if you click on raw, you can see this is how actually JSON format would look like. This is a JSON format. So typically, if you can see here, if I filter this thing, we can see JSON here. And if I beautify this, we can see different types of JSON received from server. So if I go to MDN also, we can inspect. So go here. So here MDN request. For this MDN request, if I send to the server is responding back with some JSON here. Just check this one. So when JSON is used, JSON is actually sent back to the client uh, when server wants to give some data back to the client. For suppose I'll give you an example here. So what case, in what one scenario actually this JSON is a typical use. For suppose you are watching a match, you have opened a browser, right? So you're watching a football, FIFA World Cup or anything, and you have a server. And you have a server. And a lot of clients will make across the world, they all send requests to the same server. So likewise, let's say our system, we opened up Firefox at Chrome, we sent a request, so which is get. So first get is sent to request the page. Once page is rendered, for suppose what that page is, this is a web browser, a page which contains a so and so and a match here. So team A here and team B. So this is what actually rendered in a get request. So this is response from the server. And in subsequent requests, what the client may send what is called again get or post. Maybe post contains with the current any information about timestamp or any information. So server will respond back again. So since this request is set to the same server will respond back not with the HTML. So with a JSON. So every time that score needs to be updated. So score, right? This 4-2. So every 10 seconds, we call it as polling every to update the score. So for currently, instead of polling, WebSockets can be used. They are like sockets. They stay connected and data can flow back and forth between server and client. So, but how HTTP works, again, HTTP is a stateless protocol. So what happens when request is sent to the server, connection is established first. TCP connection is established. HTTP is actually uses the transport protocol TCP and then application layer protocol HTTP. So when request is sent to the server, when server will respond back with response and connection is disconnected. So connection is once response is served and it is fully downloaded by the client when response is, and connection would be disconnected. Connection will lock. Connection will be lost. So connect, get the response and disconnect. So which is stateless protocol. So it is not connection oriented protocol, it's connectionless protocol. So no, those are a stateless protocol. So here, so for each request, so to get the state, to understand for the state, for the sake of state, so browsers use something called cookies. So with the cookies, with the help of cookies only, servers are able to identify who is the one making a request. So when sending a request, for two, so for every 10 seconds, it can send a post or get request. This can be get or post. But since it is not actually, you don't need to reload whole page. So all you need is actually part of the data, only the data. So just like data contain a team A 5, team B 7. So just like this information is only needed. So in such a case, body contains a JSON or XML. So XML is kind of old school now. So here you can see for this kind of response, we are getting actually JSON, where JSON having a lot of other data. So where this is actually, so all those websites, how actually when you visit actually any websites, how they update the score. For suppose if you load your banking website, so your website will load and then your balance and actually or other details are actually uh, loaded as a part of another separate request that may be loaded as another request, where the response contains a JSON from server, and that JSON, that data is actually browser gets the JSON. When the JSON is received, the data is received, browser fills those blanks on a web page. So this is how website works, and we have here, so to make request, we can use a postman to send any custom by using any method, and we can send a request and we can see what are the headers body and what is actually, if you use the, let's say if you post, and here also you can use raw, and you can select instead of JSON, you can select HTML text or JSON, and you can enter here if you wanted to send any JSON here in a request, and you can also see in a response what is received in a body and what is in headers.